GSB's 10 Steps to Success for Congregations can be found on page 8 of the Stewardship for All Seasons manual. It's no mistake that step number 1 is to organize the council and staff for effectiveness. Our congregations have to have effective congregation councils in order for the congregation to thrive. Too often, congregations just allow people to serve who are willing, rather than developing boards that are effective, that people want to serve on, and that ultimately become people's greatest sense of service to the church across their life. Boards exist in the church to cultivate thriving communities that bear witness to the reign of God. Boards also are the part of the organization that guards the mission and makes sure that we continue to focus on the right things. Too often, though, in the church, the board gets bogged down in the minutia of the day-to-day and fails to focus on what's strategic, what's important, and what's in the future. The Carver Model for boards says that boards will set policies and then management implements. It's a little difficult in the church because many times on the congregation council, somebody serves as a board member, and then they are also the management person who implements what's going on. When in the boardroom, you're part of the board. When leaving the boardroom, then you become management and work on implementation. Because of this dual role that people serve, it's really important that in board meetings you continue to set agendas that focus truly on the strategic, the generative, the fiduciary, and leave management activities to outside the boardroom. Working from a strategic plan can be one of the best ways to stay focused. The council should focus on the vision, what you're going to become in the future as you live out your mission, which is who you are, and your key strategic priorities. And then staff and teams, depending on the size congregation, will focus on the goals and the operations. Board and management can work together to define the priorities. These priorities are owned by the board, but implemented by staff. It's important to know how to be a board member. Having a duty of care means that you're informed for meetings before you come in, you leave your personal agenda behind, and you attend regularly. A policy for board members missing multiple meetings should result in removal from the board. A duty of loyalty says that you act in a manner that will not harm the organization. And a duty of obedience means that you carry out the purpose of the organization in the work that you do and don't lead the organization to something that it's not. Councils, to be effective, should set a clear mission. I used to say that mission statements in the church, as long as they didn't do any harm, were just simply fine. But the reality is our mission is critical. We need to know who we are, and we need to become the best at who we are that anyone can be. That will cause people to want to join us. When we don't know who we are and why we exist in today's world, it's really hard to have a strong organization. And the board carries that mission. The board should also be involved in setting SMART goals, not just a laundry list of things that would be great to see happen, but SMART goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-specific. We need to know when we're making progress and when we aren't, and the board needs to make sure that any roadblocks towards achieving our SMART goals are removed so that the organization can thrive. And finally, the board should measure success and failure. Best practices in board meetings include consent agendas. Don't make everybody read their report. Minutes should reflect a ministry that is advancing the kingdom of God. One of the hobbies I have as I visit congregations is I read the minutes of previous board meetings, and I ask myself the question, is the kingdom of God being advanced by the work of this board? And if it's not reflected in the board minutes, it's often not reflected in the congregational activity itself. Every meeting has to have a purpose. If there is not a purpose established for a meeting, the meeting should be canceled because nothing good will actually happen. Or the meeting's purpose should be to create a strategic plan since you've run out of things to do. Board members need to know the mission and the core values of the organization. If you don't know the mission and core values of the organization, that's a fine place to start your work. Council should be monitoring the strategic plan, looking at the long view. Leadership development should be happening at meetings, and council members should be recruited for the gifts they bring, not just because they are the only willing person. And finally, when people are fulfilled by their service on the council, let them share that story with others. Let them share how it's impacted them to serve. Let them know how they feel they've impacted the organization as they've set strategy and helped to see for that implementation to take place. A great activity to endeavor to with boards and councils is after each board meeting, asking questions and being honest with one another so that you can improve your meetings. Was the purpose of the meeting clearly articulated, and did we accomplish that purpose? Were council members prepared for the meeting? If not, are you willing to tell them that it was obvious they hadn't read their reports and they should do better next time? Did council members learn of or share ways in which God is active in the church and the world? I love starting council meetings out with telling stories of what God has done and been about in the life of the church, and then actually taking a few minutes for each council member to make a phone call to someone in the congregation and share the stories of what God is about. It sets a great tone for your meeting, and it teaches us how to share God's activity with others. Did we share outcome stories of the ministry? And did we focus on strategic level initiatives, or did we get bogged down and stuck in the minutia? I've seen too often councils will get bogged down over a simple item. A council once with over $1 million budget got stuck on an item that had to do with about $800. And finally, one member said, here's $100. If each of you does your part, we can cover this $800 that we need and move on. Don't let scarcity mentality freeze the group. Council needs to lead. People on the council need to step up and lead through difficult situations. Council once would establish a budget in the fall and then do a planning retreat in January to decide what to do. This council desperately needed a strategic plan to give guidance to what funding should be established for and how to move forward prior to funding decisions being made. Once a congregation established community service as a core value, but if you looked at their budget, there was no service to the community listed. Jesus says, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Leadership needs to look at who you are and then look in concrete ways if the organization is truly living into that identity. And if not, the organization will die, and the council needs to lead it, the organization, to be living out who you are. Once a congregation was confused why they were shrinking, but if you looked, they had no growth goal. How many first-time visitors did you have last year or last month? What's your goal for that? If the answer is you don't know or you don't have a goal for this, it's likely that you won't grow unless you get lucky. We tend to be good at what we pay attention to. If we have a goal for first-time visitors, implement tactics to achieve that goal, and then at least learn from it even if it's not working. Finally, I encourage you to use a dashboard to track what's important to you. If you're interested in attendance trends, track your attendance, put it on a dashboard so you can see every week or every month how you're doing. If revenue is important, look at that. First-time visitors, faith formation participation, service activity participation. Define what's important to you, find ways to track it, and keep it in front of you at all times so that you're paying attention to what's most important. Too often in the church, the only thing we measure is profit and loss, and that becomes what's important to us when there's much more ministry happening behind those numbers that deserve to be tracked. I believe that if councils change their focus and work from the strategic, work from a clear identity of who the organization is, and has a clear vision for what we want to become in the future and the ways in which we'll impact our members and the world, then service on the Congregation Council will be seen as the highlight of service in our journey and in our time in our church.